This video is a story of a revolution, and I'm talking about the Swarmlings revolution, initiated by truth player specialist Nashville, but really engineered by my good friend Logus, and developed by the BGA community biggest names such as Nerdcube. Swarmlings have been reinvented lately, and that is what we are going to see. This is not just a video about Swarmlings, it's a video about how Swarmlings should be played properly. It's a video about 7 structure Swarmlings. Or actually 9 structure Swarmlings if you're playing with landscape. Welcome to the ultimate guide to Swarmlings, part 1. So first of all, I think the most important thing to say is that Swarmlings are probably the faction that are the most misleading because of their name in Terra Mystica and thematic that kind of doesn't really fit with who they are. Because when you think of Swarmlings, the first image that gets into your head is kind of a swarm of insects, a kind of faction that will be very, very inclined to build, not to build wide, to expand a lot, to multiply. Right? It evokes the image of a series of expendable units that with which you're going to swarm your opponents. But actually Swarmlings is the exact opposite. Swarmlings are a faction that are kind of ponderous, that will build very tall and not very wide. And that's really how you should play Swarmlings. So if we start by having a look at the player mat of the Swarmling, the first thing that should strike you is that the building cost is very different. So opposite to engineers, all Swarmlings building have an extra cost. So all their building, for example, cost an extra worker. Dwellings, trading posts, temple, sanctuary, stronghold, they all cost one more worker than building these buildings for the vanilla faction. They also cost extra coins, from 1 to 2 extra coins for each building. Meaning that Swarmlings buildings are quite expensive to build. And contrary to engineers who have a very different income from their buildings as a result of their different building costs, the Swarmlings isn't much different. What you get is one more worker income naturally. And by itself, that will be completely insufficient to compensate from the fact that you're getting one worker cost from every building. So the only thing that makes Swarmlings playable is their stronghold, which is really good, which will give you an extra trading post every turn. So that's the first thing you learn about playing Swarmling. You will want your stronghold in round 1 every time, right? So because it almost pays for itself with the first trading post that you build. I mean, the trading post costs you 3 worker, 4 coins, and stronghold is 4 worker, 8 coins. So it almost pays for itself. So that's one thing that will make your economy viable. And the second thing is the fact that every city gives you 3 workers. So the way you're going to compensate for the extra cost is mainly through building through your stronghold ability, and then having the 3 worker from the town. Now, of course, that means that you're gonna want your town as early as possible to get the boost from the workers that you get by building the town. And the last thing in terms of building that changes is the sanctuary, which produces 2 priests. That is excellent. Swarmlings will want their sanctuary early, as we will see soon, because they have a bonus, an important bonus, by getting an extra priest. And also, as we will see too, they are very much incentivized to build tall. So that's the main thing that will kind of compensate for the extra worker costs. Then some kind of minor details about how the Swarmlings mat is disposed, you see that you start with extra resources to make up from the extra costs. It means often that you will be able to do a lot of stuff in round one. We'll go into that later in the series. And also your cult situation. So you start with 4 cult bombs, 1 in every cult, and that gives you a kind of head start on cult. It gives you the opportunity to play for any cult income that you want. It gives you, it may not seem that much to have 1 step in every cult, but it's really giving the Swarmlings a head start in terms of cult, and it will favorize their play as a cult-heavy faction. And we will see again, that will be one idea of how to play them. It will be a cult-heavy faction. Finally, Swarmlings start with 9 power in both 2, meaning that they will be in very good position to take double speed early in round 1, and often that will be important, especially if you adopt a more kind of aggressive placement with your initial dwellings. Alright, so next I wanted to show you a little table of how the economy for Swarmlings work. More precisely on how costly things are to build for Swarmlings. And I won't go through in detail of all of these numbers, you can check them out. But the main conclusion I'm drawing from this is that the buildings on which you get less of an extra cost are your big buildings. It's the exact opposite in engineers. So you definitely want to build Swarmlings tall. You want those buildings will be the most efficient one, especially since we've seen that both are very good. I mean, there's no doubt the stronghold is very good, but also the extra priest you get from the sanctuary is very good. So you're gonna want these big buildings out early. Just precision in these numbers, this includes the free trading post that the Swarmlings gets, so that's why we have these numbers in the end. Alright. So now that we have cleared that up and that we have considered the different feeders of Swarmlings, we're ready to design a game plan that will become the 7 structure Swarmlings. You'll want to play small and tall. These dwellings are extremely expensive to build. You don't want to build them, you don't want to build too many of them. They are your most expensive and inefficient building to build. You'll want to rely on other sources of workers, production, such as city, cult, maybe, and use your special ability. So as little dwelling as possible, that will mean 7 structures Swarmlings. You will, ideally, if you're playing without landscape, you're probably just gonna build 5 dwellings in the whole game. The idea why 7 structures, why 7 dwellings? Because a total of 7 dwellings if you count the 2 initial, and that's because you need 7 structures in order to build 2 cities, and that's what you're going to go for. Cities are good, they give you points, they will give you reward, and they will give you extra reward because of these 3 workers you get for every city. So you definitely want to build cities. That's your main incentive to expand, but you want to have as little structures as you can to get those 2 cities, and 7 structures will also be what the minimum in order to use all your free trading posts. So you have to build 1 trading post to get to the stronghold, but then you get 6 free trading posts for your 7 other structures. So to not waste any of these, you need 7 structures. So you're gonna play as small as possible, 7 structures, and you're gonna have these structures upgraded a lot in order to do the town and do the points through these way. You'll want to obviously play on cults rather than networks. So if the plan is to build as few structures as you can, because it's expensive and it's not worth doing it, you're going to aim at playing on the cults as much as you can. Because you need endgame points, and endgame points, clearly you're not designed to play on network, therefore you're rather turn to cults. And as we've seen, you have some kind of advantage for the cults. You have the initial cult bump, you have the 2 priests that you get from the sanctuary, so you have some reason that you'll be able to play in cult, that you shall do well in cult. Then you'll try to get your income, especially worker income, more from cults rather than structures. The trading posts you get for free, so they're going to give you the coins. But if you can get events for the big buildings and use them, not just these events won't be important for Swarmling just for the points that you can get out of them, but also for the income that you can get from them, because it's much more efficient to get a priest, say, to fire or air and get 2 workers out of it because it's the first one, than to build 2 dwellings to get the same 2 workers. It's a lot more efficient. So try to get your economy from cults rather than structures. You will play mainly for as Swarmlings for pass tiles rather than track. And the idea is that Swarmlings have this ability to play tall fast early on. And once you've played tall, you're able to capitalize on that through passing tiles. So you use this kind of head start that you get from the beginning of the game to capitalize on the passing tiles that you can receive. And finally, since you won't go for many structures, there's not much point to go for Earth 1 with Swarmlings. If you go for 7 structures, then clearly Earth 1 is not going to be very valuable. So Swarmlings is that one faction who will often prefer Water 1 and even Air 1 to Earth 1. Actually, Air 1 is maybe even stronger than Water 1 for Swarmlings, because Swarmlings will tend to make points to capitalize on structures they have already built rather than by building structure. That's why they like passing tiles, and that's why they like Air 1. So, of course, I mean, there will be situations, we will talk about that too, where it's possible to play on network, well, it's possible to go for Earth 1 on Swarmlings, but in the past it used to be the main way people would like to play Swarmlings. If they didn't get Earth 1, they still will try to do 3 towns and to play on network. But what we will see here is not very efficient a way to play Swarmlings. The way you want to play them is not waste any of these expensive dwellings. It's rather better to go for the minimum structures you need in order to have 2 towns and build your trading posts and try to capitalize on these points, both by the Water 1 and Air 1, but especially with the passing tiles that you're going to focus completely on. And the fact that you're going for few structures, it will often give you this flexibility to delay, to play your turn fast or slow as much as you want in order to get the pass tiles that will really be the key. So let's move to our ideal setup. And again, Swarmlings are, as already you might get an idea, Swarmlings are a peculiar faction, and for setup they're special too. So I've kind of kept the regular overlay that I use to present the setup, but this should be read a little differently as Swarmlings. First of all, Swarmlings are definitely the faction that are the less neighbor sensitive. That means that they don't really care about who else is in play. It's not totally true. Of course, you kind of like when the yellow faction is there, because sometimes they will give you leech. But even there will be situation where you'll decide to not even start next to a yellow faction, because leech is not that important for Swarmling. It's less important than for other faction, but also because, as you will see, you kind of want to play Swarmlings in a bit of a denying way. Other faction will do more with leech than you, so it's not a bad idea to not trade leech with another faction necessarily in the same way. So yeah, they are kind of less faction sensitive. Especially in terms of the color wheel, they care less about neighbor in the color wheel. What I would say is that you would prefer not having cult-heavy factions such as Cultist, Chaos Magician, Auron, or Dwarves, because cult will be your bread and butter. You'll want to have a strong cult game, and those are more of a threat than the other factions, since anyway you're not going to build many structures, so having color neighbor is not that a big deal for Swarmlings. So in terms of the track, first of all, as I said, ideally you want your worker income from the track. That is, if you can get some workers off the track, it will really help you, because you don't have a very efficient way to produce worker through your structures. Ideally, so I've put the fire big building event, but the air big building will do just as well. Also, these big building will be really good because you'll want them both early. You want your stronghold and sanctuary early. So round 1 to 3 big buildings are always good for Swarmlings for the 2 reasons. You kind of double down on them. So it's very interesting if you can get these events early for Swarmlings. And if you get them late, it's still good for the income that it gives you again. But often I see people doing the mistake of delaying their sanctuary to round 4 or 5. I would say, especially if you have the big building bonus, you will want almost always your sanctuary by the end of round 3. Don't wait for round 4 or 5 just for the 5 points, it doesn't worth it. The sanctuary will give you air 1, which is 3 points, so that's only a 2 points difference. And for the priest that you will get, the extra priest that you will get, definitely worth having your sanctuary early. So it's still not bad to have these events around 4 and 5 because of the income, but you're not necessarily looking to cash in from the points in these events. It's kind of too late to build your sanctuary. Second thing that I kind of like about Swarmlings. So early town event, Swarmlings will want their town early, so having an early town event is good for them. They are one of the few factions who can build a town in round 2 consistently. If there is the event in round 4, often Swarmlings will be able to build both their temples in both their towns in round 4, which very few factions can do as consistently as them. So that's pretty good for them too. And yeah, if you're playing with landscape, there is a case to be said about having town event in the last round, because the landscape will help you delay 2 towns until the last round, so it's not so bad for them. I still prefer to do my town early, usually with Swarmlings, so I kind of not looked for town event late as a good thing, and especially since it's a high scoring event, so you will prefer to have lower scoring event as Swarmlings. Then trading post, I liked early trading post. In round 1 you'll be one of the few faction, almost the only faction who will do true trading post in round 1. So it gives you kind of 3 points edge on everyone. It's not an incredible edge, but it's something. And temple round 2, Swarmlings is one faction that doesn't mind at all delaying their temple to round 2. They will do very often. They can do in round 1, but they often will wait till round 2 and even round 3. And one of the reasons for that is that they don't feel any pressure to get hurt 1. So, and because they need their stronghold first, they always get late for it anyway. So delaying their temple for round 2 is not a problem for them. Could almost say that temple round 3 will be alright too. Then for round 6, that's interesting. I used to think if you're used to the old mentality of Swarmlings, you expect to see the dwelling event here. And I used to think the dwelling event meant it was very good for Swarmlings, because often Swarmlings will kind of explode in the last round and be able to do a lot of dwellings. The thing is, the mentality that we want to play Swarmlings here, you won't go for a big explosion of dwelling in round 6, which won't give you much points. If you think about it, if you don't have Earth 1, the dwellings that you build for 2 points will give you only 1/6 of a point, so that's not really worth it unless you're pretty sure that you can get the third town and the network points. Otherwise, I would say it's better to play as small as you need to get all the town that you can do, which is 2 if you play without landscape, or 3 if you play with it. So Instead, I found the temple in round 6 is very good for 7 structure swarmlings. And even surprisingly, I found that the trading post can be quite alright for them. They will be able to do sometimes 2 trading posts in the last round, depending on how they build. That will be more true with landscape though, because in landscape you play a little more structures, meaning that you will have more space for an extra trading post. But doing 2 trading posts in last round won't be that much less than others. And that's the key. I mean, you're not gonna score much off the track in round 5 to 6, in round 4 to 6 compared to other faction in most of the games, especially round 5 and 6, because you're playing. Contrary to the traditional swarmlings who are very, very snowbally, the idea of 7 structure swarmlings is you develop early on, but you don't develop in a snowball way. So you're gonna build tile and try to use bonus tiles instead. So in round 5-6 you don't expect to be able to score much off the track, and that's why you prefer a low scoring track. And that's one of the reasons the temple event is perfect, because often you'll be able to do 1 or 2 and no one is going to do more than that. So it's really advantageous. That's why double events, so I didn't list them all because it will be too long. But for example, if you can have TP in round 5 and 6, that will be very good, because when you have double events on the track, it's usually a lower scoring track. So things to look for. You want a low scoring track, ideally something like temple, and sometimes even trading posts you can exploit. I would say though that's again more true for trading posts if you're playing with landscape. Finally, the spade event we'll see is kind of peculiar. Swarmlings can really exploit that event to their advantage. The fact that they get 3 workers to chant will help them to use the digging event. Swarmlings always want to advance digging, and I suggest to play them. So you can manage to do it in round 4 and score a lot of points from the digging events. Swarmlings are actually a very good digging faction to exploit the digging event in round 4. So that's very good for them too. Alright, and then the most important for Swarmlings, your bread and butter as Swarmlings, well, partly is the cult as I said, but it's also the bonus tile, and very much the bonus tile. Those 2 bonus tiles are excellent for Swarmlings. You'll want to capitalize on them. Stronghold Sanctuary, because you're almost the only faction we will consistently have Stronghold Sanctuary by the end of round 3, meaning that you're by far the faction that can exploit this bonus tile the best. Also, the fact that it gives you 2 workers income is very good. Again, you're trying to get your worker sources from different than the structures that you've built. Trading post event is not as good. Well, it gives you only 1 worker instead of 2, and it will take a while before you can score as much as with the Stronghold Sanctuary event, so not before round 5. But on the other end, it has the very big upside that not many faction will be interested in this bonus early on. So you kind of have in the early round Monopoly, no one should pass. It's rare that people will pass for it, so you should be able to rely on it more than the big building bonus, which is very contested usually. So that has this big upside. And then if the pass shipping trading bonus is in, it will be interesting. It will give you an extra way to score. Because of their sanctuaries, Swarmlings have no problem producing priests. And because of their free trading posts, they usually have no problem producing money neither, meaning that they are very well positioned to capitalize on this bonus tile. So it's not as important as the other 2, but it can be pretty good. It's still important. And again, as Swarmlings, you'll try to score much more with bonus tile than you'll try with the track. The one bonus tile that you don't want to be in the game is the dwelling, the pastling one, because obviously Swarmlings won't have much dwelling down at any time, except maybe in round 6 if you're playing them more like traditionally. But in the way that I suggest to play them and the way that the BGA community has developed them, you'll, even in round 6, you won't have many dwellings. So that's something that you will very, very, very rarely be able to use, and you don't want others to make points out of it. It's not a deal breaker if it's in, but it's one factor that you know that you will have very little use for this bonus tile. Alright, so that's it for this first video of the series. Hope you enjoyed it and you're enthusiastic to see more precisely how to play 7 structure Swarmlings. In the next video we will consider the starting spots for Swarmlings and we'll start to see what is their main plan when you play 7 structures. Alright, thanks for listening, bye bye.